For a couple of weeks after our run-in with the contaminated apartment building, there were a lot of people coming and going. Sheriff Mason had called in the cavalry. I saw a couple of unmarked vans, and at one point, a bus, a sort of mobile base. I saw people associated with the DUC once. They were wearing a sort of battery-powered full-cover helmet that looked straight out of a cheap sci-fi flick. Mason was too busy to be bothered, but I talked a lot with Nick. Apparently, these were the people you called in when there was something you couldn't normally handle. Things like lactose parasites, a virus that reacted to delta waves, or a being that could camouflage itself so well that you needed a type of paranoid schizophrenia to see them. The stories he told were outright mad, but they were all second or third-hand accounts, and slightly embellished. I only met M once back in 13, Nick explained. We got containment duty. Nasty business. An eruption, or localized geological event, spewed a bunch of cave gunk into the air. Made some kind of thing go wonky. It all sort of smelled like dinner to M. What do you mean, thing? I didn't see M. I just sprayed down the cars and hoped they'd go another way. But we didn't have enough drainage, so it all just... It was a mess. Nick shook his head with a sigh. If we got these people around, there's gonna be problems. But we got bigger problems if they ain't here. Mason didn't keep us in the loop. Most of the time he sent us out on seemingly random errands. One time we were to sit by a field of blue sunflowers, armed with shotguns, tasked to shoot anything that moved. Anything. Luckily, we didn't see anything, but still, another time, he asked us to go to supermarkets in the area and buy a number of items. We were then to meet up with an associate that would handle the items and double-check for statistical issues. Didn't sound all too bad, but I got a bit nervous when the lady we handed it to came fully geared in one of those CDC hazmat suits. There was no patch or mark, she was unaffiliated. We also had to do bi-daily check-ins on Frog Lake. Both to make sure the frog population was in check, but also to see if someone was swimming around. It was early January, but apparently it was known to happen. The lake had historical significance to the area, and people sometimes did strange things in it. I remember stopping at the local gas station for a hot dog with Nick once. We'd been out to check the trees for red birds all day, and I was getting sick and tired of being thrown around town like a wet napkin. This wasn't police work, and I made my dissatisfaction known, at least to Nick. I hear ya, he said. But we don't have anyone else. The closest fire department is up in St. Cloud, and the less we talk about animal control, the better. I don't get it, I sighed. Sheriff just drops a weird word and all of a sudden it's high alert for weeks on end. The year walk thing, Nick corrected. Yeah. It's gonna be months. So you know what this is? A year walk. Right. He continued, finishing his hot dog. It's like an idiot holding up an eat meat sign and all kinds of weird shit shakes loose to have a bite. And anyone can do this, at any time. Nah, you gotta be in the right place at the right time. There's gotta be like an intent. He tapped the side of his head, and you gotta be an idiot. While the sheriff and the higher-ups kept chasing their tails with big-picture stuff, we were the boots on the ground. Nick and I were kept in the dark about a lot of details, but we were still expected to drop everything at the drop of a hat. I mean, that's the job, but it's not what I signed up for. I contemplated quitting outright. There were other jobs around Tomskog to apply for, and this just didn't seem worth it. We were always on call, and sometimes we'd get rung up for the most ridiculous things. Like this one time when I got a call to check on an elderly woman. I was to see if she had something in her ear. If she didn't, I was to give her migraine medication. How is that urgent enough to wake me at 2:30 a.m.? But that's the thing with Tomskog, no matter the call, it's a coin flip between nothing and a nightmare. And we were due for a nightmare. One day we got a call about someone dumping trash by the side of the road. It wasn't a priority call, but the sheriff was too busy to hand out any other orders. So yeah, Nick and I checked it out. It was an early January morning. Sun was still rising and the snow from the previous night was still settling. Not a cloud in sight, just a light mist rising from the warming frost. The kind of weather where it feels like summer but looks like winter. Nick pulled over and smacked the dashboard. His sunglasses looked more pink than usual, up and at them. We're here. I stepped out to see a washing machine by the side of the road, cables and pipes and all. It looked to be a couple generations behind, but still pretty modern. The only weird thing about it was the color. It was solid black. I guess we just haul it off, I said. You got a junkyard? Nick wasn't convinced. He walked up to it and opened the hatch, something black inside. Looks like oil. So it's broken. Then why didn't they throw it away? How is leaving it by the side of the road not throwing it away? Nick nodded, adjusting his pink sunglasses and scratching his head. I dunno about this one, he admitted. This has weird shit written all over it. We called Sheriff Mason and got a clear order to drive the thing out of town and drop it off a cliff. I thought it was an exaggeration, but he made it abundantly clear. Not burn it, not crush it, not dump it at a yard, drive it far out of town and drop it off a steep cliff. It was odd, to say the least, but we were used to it by then. We tipped the thing over, draining the liquid, and threw it in the back of the car. It was a strange substance, like a watery black pudding. It kept bubbling, despite not being warm. Nick kicked it off the road. Threw a rock at it, and we were on our way. We took a long ride out of town, following a dirt road that had barely been touched. We drove past Lake Saturdead and took a turn at what looked like an old quarry. I gave Nick a curious look. Boss said drop it off a cliff. So we're dropping it off a cliff. And up we went. We took the thing out and pushed it all the way up. I could tell this was a sort of gathering for high school kids. The only thing left behind were empty beer cans and half-smoked poorly rolled joints. Nick didn't seem to notice, or care. We pushed the washing machine all the way to the edge at the top of the quarry. It's strange, you don't know how high up you really are until you look down. Every whiff of wind that passed by made the cliff whistle, and every uneasy step had this long echo to it. Nick didn't seem all too bothered by it. I started to suspect that maybe he'd been one of the kids who hung out here. Once upon a time, we braced ourselves and gave the washing machine a final push off a cliff. It wasn't a straight drop. The thing bounced against the side 2 to 3 times, gaining in speed, before it splashed into the water far below. It took about a minute before it sunk, and when it did, I could see something black pouring out, puddling on the surface of the water. I'm sure it's fine, Nick smiled. Let's get lunch. There wasn't that much going on for the rest of the day. The sheriff was pleased to hear that we'd followed his orders to the letter. Apparently, we'd solved the Hank burn issue before it even started. He did not elaborate. As the day came to an end and I changed into my civilian clothes, I found a black spot on my socks. Turns out, a splotch from the washing machine had stuck to them. I didn't think much about it. I just threw it all into my laundry basket. I figured I'd deal with it soon enough, but as these things often go, I kind of forgot about it. We got really busy the next few days. Some of the folks we ran into at the Babin apartment complex were facing complications and had to be hospitalized. We were called in to provide assistance, literally holding some of them down as they were given medication. Even after all this time, some of them still had blue discoloration on their skin. Nick also made an effort to check in on John Digman and his family. Just dropping by occasionally to check on him from afar, making sure there was nothing strange going on. I couldn't help but to get the feeling that Nick resented these people. I didn't quite understand why. Yes, the Digman fellow had started something, but I couldn't grasp what it was. But the younger guy. He just seemed like a scared kid. Hell, he barely ever left his apartment. It took me weeks to even get his name, Peter, or using his nickname, Perry. It was after a particularly long day that I came home to a strange sensation. I was kicking off my shoes when I felt a salty smell. It took me a while to realize it was coming from the laundry basket. I hadn't thought about it for some time, but opening it made a wall of stench wash over me. Pushing some underwear and shirts aside, I found my stained socks. Except it wasn't just a little black stain stuck to the side anymore, it had grown to the size of a tennis ball, and it was pulsating. Yeah, I wasn't having it. I'd seen enough of Tom Skog to know it was not the kind of thing I wanted to get involved in. Instead, I tossed all of my used clothes in, closed the basket, and took it out back. I grabbed some lighter fluid from the kitchen and set the whole thing on fire. I thought I heard a scream from it, but I convinced myself it was just air pressure. Perhaps it was. Once there was nothing but ashes left. I took a shovel and buried it in a hole at the edge of my property, just in case. Then it was business as usual. We spent an entire day throwing garbage bags into an incinerator. Another day we checked horses for fleas. Not the kind of police work I'd imagined, but whatever. At least I wasn't alone in my misery. Nick was right there, sharing the suffering, but late at night, I couldn't help but to worry. I'd find myself glancing out the window to where I'd buried that thing, imagining it swelling like pus in the dirt. At times I convinced myself that I could taste that salty smell in the air. The stress of moving to Thompson had reignited an old habit of mine, smoking. I'm not proud of it. But it was a way to deal with things. Like holding hands with an old and terrible friend. At times I'd wake up in the middle of the night and sit by the window, having a cigarette as I imagined something erupting from the ground, just out of sight. One of those nights were worse than the others. We had an awful snow-mixed rainfall. It was practically snowing sideways, the kind of weather where you could put a hand out the window and make a snowball. It was eerie, sounding like little taps against the windows. Someone could have knocked on my door and I wouldn't even notice. It had snowed all day. Nick and I had mostly stayed at the station, answering calls and writing up reports. There'd been some lights flickering earlier, making me unsure about firing up my computer. Power wasn't always a certain thing in Thompson, it seemed. I stuck to my phone instead, playing some music to drown out the howling wind. Every now and then, I'd peer out the window. I couldn't see anything on a good day. But during a stormy night, I could barely see my car. It was all dark. I'd put on a playlist and cracked a window to blow out some cigarette smoke. I watched the smoke swirl and twist until the wind caught it. It was almost poetic, in a way. The natural state of things taking away all the bad, one cutting breeze at a time. Then, as I blew out the last of my cigarette, the smoke shifted. I was blowing straight into something solid, like a black wall. There was something pitch black right in front of me. My heart skipped a beat. Looking up, I saw the snow gather around the edges of something impossible, tall and dark as the night. I could guess the vague silhouette of a person. But it was so dark that it looked invisible. It was at least 9 feet tall, and solid black, and still as a grave. I slowly stepped back, keeping my eyes on it. I reached for my phone, clicking off the music. The thing outside didn't make any noise, it just stood there. Now, I'd seen things since I got to Thompson. But this was something completely different. It wasn't just weird or quirky, it was downright impossible. There was nothing like this in the history books. They don't teach you about this at the academy. This was the kind of thing only nightmares can teach you about. I looked down at my phone, placing my thumb on the number pad. I didn't dare to look away for too long, shifting my gaze up and down between the thing at the window and my phone. Sheriff Mason was higher up in my contact list than Nick, so I just made the first call I could. I had to reach someone, anyone. 2 signals passed. What? The sheriff answered. There's something outside my window, I whispered. It's tall. Ink black. Maybe 9 feet. It's just standing there. What? He repeated. It's outside, right now. I don't know what to do. Didn't you throw the goddamn washing machine off a cliff? Wait. Yes. Then how are you? There was a crackling noise as something moved. I gasped, and the sheriff shut up. A 5-fingered black hand gently pressed against the window, causing something dark to drip down the side and pooling at the bottom of the window frame. The thing looked in with a blank, featureless face. No eyes, or nose, or mouth. Just a head, like it only barely remembered what a person was supposed to look like. I think it's trying to get in, I whispered. What? What do I do? Is it all black? All the way through? I think. Yeah, I think so. You see nothing white? Nothing at all? No, I said, looking a little closer. No, there's nothing. The hand pressed harder. The glass shook, and as cracks gathered, it was already too late. It only took a second. The window shattered, and a long arm reached for me. The warmth of my home dissipated as a freezing wind forced its way in. Shards of glass littered my bedroom carpet. I was casually dressed in a pair of sweatpants and a simple white top. Up until now that had been enough. All of a sudden it felt like nothing. I dropped to the floor, not even noticing my phone bouncing away. The long arm seemed to bend and twist at impossible angles, fumbling towards me. It knocked down a painting in my bedside table along with a lamp that shattered on the floor, destroying the last of what little light I had. I crawled under my bed, searching desperately for my phone and cutting my hands on the broken glass. I looked back as I heard another creaking noise. Watching a long leg gently step inside, I could hear a distorted voice coming through my phone, somewhere off to the other side of the bed. Reaching for it, something stirred in the back of my mind. I pulled my hand back, at the speed of a heartbeat. One of those long ink-like arms reached all the way across my bed and slammed down a viscous fist on my phone, pulverizing it with a force that made the floor bend and crack. I stayed under my bed, instinctively covering my mouth with my bleeding hands. I tried to control my breathing as to not snort my own blood. The thing was inside my home. The window was broken. I heard an uneven stomping as the thing stumbled back and forth. It had the dexterity of a newborn deer on ice, slipping on carpets and cables, thrashing against every corner of furniture and every door left askew. It's as if it didn't understand what a home was and recognized everything only as frustrating obstacles. As soon as something moved, it would launch itself in that direction with complete abandon, crushing anything in its path. Because of its size, it would accidentally knock things off tables and walls, which in turn would cause it to turn and attack. And still, it didn't say a thing. No grunting, no huffing, nothing. Looking around, the only thing within my reach was my cigarettes and lighter. I had my car keys in my pocket, but I'd need those if I were to get out of there. As the thing thrashed around in my living room, I planned my next move. It was only a matter of time before it found me, and I had to be proactive. I was gonna trick it to give myself some time. As a dull moment lulled, I looked out from under my bed and angled my hand towards the broken window. With a flick of the wrist, I threw my cigarettes and lighter, hitting the corner of a dangling shard. There was a little tink sound. Not enough for the thing to notice. But as the shard came loose in the wind, I held my breath. It fell. It shattered against the window frame, and a smattering of footsteps came thundering towards me from the living room. It took the bait. In little more than a second, a dark mass threw itself out the window, bringing along whatever shards had managed to hold on. That thing was so big that I could feel the rush of the wind follow it. It fumbled around in the snow, desperately smashing and stomping at everything and anything. I had to make a judgment call. Should I try to sneak by or make a run for it? I decided to play it safe. I took it slow. I crawled out, holding my breath. I chose my steps carefully, but it was dark. It was hard to tell what I was stepping on. I poked around with my big toe, making sure I didn't step on any big shards of glass. The thing was too busy messing around outside to notice. Taking my hands off my mouth, I slowly relaxed my lungs. I forced new air in, the cold mixing with my adrenaline to send shivers down my spine. Making my way into the living room, I could feel my weight pressing down on the wooden frame of a fallen photo. I think it was my graduation picture. The frame slipped, and I lost my footing. The world turned upside down as I landed face first on the floor, losing my breath with a violent thump. I could tell I'd bruised my shoulder. The noise outside stopped, and for a second or two, there was a perfect silence. Then it attacked. I looked back as it came crawling back inside like a squirming tadpole. I got up on my feet, rushing towards the front door. I had a head start, but it was gaining on me. I caught a break as it tripped over my couch, but even then a long arm managed to brush against the back of my head, fingertips sticking to my hair like freshly chewed gum. I ran outside, the snow soaking straight through my socks. Keeping my head low, I ran for my car. A click of a button, and I dove in on the passenger side. The moment I did, a wet hand slapped against the window, accidentally closing the door behind me. The hand was large enough to cover the window almost entirely. For a brief moment, I thought I'd made it. It couldn't get in. Then the glass started to crack. I remember crawling backwards over to the driver's side. I heard this murmur, a begging. I didn't even realize it was coming from me. As the window on the passenger side door shattered, I rolled out the driver's side door. It would have to crawl through the car to get to me, I thought, but no, it was too late. The arm was too long. It reached all the way through the car, grabbed my legs, and pulled. I was dragged through both windows, straight through the car, and thrown out on the other side. My whole body felt like a cold bruise. I couldn't get up. I tried to move, but I just managed to roll a couple inches, panting for dear life. That thing loomed over me, ready to strike, to crush me. It had no face, but it moved its head like it observed me, bobbing back and forth, like a snake. And still, in that moment, I was trying to fight. It was all I could do. So when it raised its impossibly long arms, I expected all the lights in my mind to go out. That I'd done all I could, and that'd be that, and in that split second, a primal fear gripped me. I regretted everything. Absolutely everything, but I heard a light tone. The world stood still for a moment, another light tone, a distant car. It was honking. I tried my luck just a little and moved, but felt a massive hand press me down, albeit carefully. It was curious, and didn't pay me no mind for now. But it wasn't letting me go anytime soon. A car rolled around the corner, and the driver got out as soon as we got caught in the headlights. It made me realize how dark this thing really was. It reflected nothing. It was like a black hole. Sheriff Mason stepped out, wearing nothing but a shirt, cotton slacks, and a pair of slippers. He waved at us, forcing a whistle from the lips hidden behind his walrus-like mustache. "Hey!" he called out. "Hank! Hank Byrne!" The thing turned to him, letting me go as it did. Whatever this was, it found Mason far more interesting. Mason stepped forward, silently ushering me to get inside my house with his left hand, making a phone gesture. He wanted me to call someone. Nick, probably. I hurried inside. The last owner still had a landline, and I figured I might as well use it. As I did, I could still hear them speak outside. "Hank, I'm sorry," Mason said. "I thought you were safe and sound. I didn't think you'd get lost like this." There was no response, but Mason paused as if there was. "This must be scary, I know," he continued. "And painful. Terribly painful. I get it. You never asked for any of this." There was a thump. The creature moved. "Look, I got you something." "I know it hurts, son. It hurts bad. This is what you're looking for, right?" A pop of a trunk, a shuffling noise. A couple more thumps. "There we go," Mason sighed. "It's okay. Take as many as you want." As the thumping grew distant, Mason came inside the house. I called Nick and screamed at him to hurry over, and for a short moment it was just me and the sheriff. He flipped over my couch and collapsed on it, taking a long shivering breath. I couldn't tell if he was scared or freezing, or both. What did you do?" "I got him a bunch of bones." Bones. "Yes, ma'am," Mason nodded. "Bones. You gotta give me more than that." "Fair enough," he groaned. "You've earned it." Turns out, in a town like Tomskog, some things never really go away. And many years ago, when a sick high school kid got crushed by a washing machine, it seems that something got stuck, so Hank, he repeats what he remembers, Mason explained. And that kid, he remembers something awful. "And what is that?" Mason looked me in the eyes, and for a moment I wasn't paying attention to his stupid mustache, or his bacon-fed cheeks. This was a man who'd seen things. He remembers all his bones breaking, and wants to put himself back together. Nick showed up after a while. He'd let me with him for a couple of days as we replaced the windows. I was slowly coming to terms with the fact that if the sheriff hadn't shown up, that thing would have literally ripped the bones from my body. Now it was free to roam however it wanted, something that didn't seem all too alarming for Sheriff Mason. It was to be a later issue, it seemed. As Nick drove me back to his place, I clutched a plastic bag with toiletries and clothes, and wondered. Did I want to do this? Could I? Why? Nick patted me on the shoulder, snapping me back to reality. We watched the snow collapsing against the windshield. Wipers went back and forth, struggling against the glass. "It's okay," Nick smiled. "We got this." I looked ahead at the endless tunnel of dark. I took a deep breath, feeling the salty sting of sweat burn against my wounds. I watched Nick's pink sunglasses vibrate on the dashboard and felt the absence of my cigarettes. "Yeah," I nodded. "We got this."